was after clearing exams for IIT that I thought I could now get back to life and start exploring the world for myself. I thought now the exams were over and the pressure was out, I could start learning how to live life myself, listen to my own heart. But that was not how it was supposed to be. Soon after the exams, after the results were out, I was being hailed by my family and others as some hallmark of brilliance. And the overwhelming congratulatory all that I received for the next 5 years brought me back into deception. It was quite, it's amazing to see the uncanny ability of the world to take you away from your own self. And soon I was doing things that I never really wanted to do, running after things that I never even wanted to have in the very first place. I now wanted to start a company. I wanted to do MBA from a reputed school because all that I thought was the in thing of the era. And I also wanted to do something good for the world. So after graduating, I took up a job with the World Bank. Only a year later, I realized that our definitions of doing good differed slightly. And a year later, then I decided to finally quit the job, quit the degrees, quit the worldly definitions of success and failure, to listen to my heart again, to see what is it that I really wanted to do. Because sometime in class 7th or 8th that I had got hold of a nice book. It was a book on Tagore and on his life and his journey, and I had read how he had quit school and how he had created his own learning pattern, and it quite fascinated me. And how he had started this little place called Shantiniketan. Now, back in school I liked what I read, but I did not have the courage to pursue the same thing. And after I had quit my job, and when I was trying to figure out what my heart was into, I thought, what if I could start one such space too? A space for children where they could freely learn. And a space which is unlike a regular school. Now, why I say unlike a regular school is because there were so many things about the present day schooling system that outrightly baffled me. I mean, things that I could not get my head around. For instance, why is it that children from the age of 3 years onwards, and nowadays 2, are kind of going through a set curriculum and timetable when they are not even participating in what they are kind of. They are not even asked, what do you want to learn, how do you want to learn, when do you want to learn, and going through this rigid regimental system wherein their choices are not even being considered. And the second is why we are putting similar age group of children stacked together in a classroom when all of us outside like to learn from one another across ages and hate being evaluated on some straight-jacketed norms. I somehow knew this, that the present day schooling system and the education system was not the best that we could have come up with. We who have come up with wondrous symphonies, with unbelievable artwork, with innumerable stories and myths to explain mystery of human life, could definitely have come up with something way better. Something that is much closer to the way we organically learn. Something that aids our curiosity and not a system that systematically kills it. So I spent about 3 years going around the country, visiting different places, spent time in villages with tribal people, with monasteries, trying to figure out how different people understand education differently. And interestingly, through my journey, more than the experts, meeting and getting to know the so-called illiterate and the uneducated people helped me understand some of these issues better. For instance, when I was young, that is in school, whenever we used to go to visit our grandparents in the village, I used to look down upon them. I used to look down upon the villagers. I used to think that my parents have overcome all that misery and hope that these people too someday would find their way out of poverty and ignorance. But 2 years ago, when my grandfather passed away, I went and stayed with my grandmother for about a month and a half. And there were 3 things that I noticed during my stay there. The first was that not for a single moment was my grandmother alone. There were about 10 to 15 women who would finish off their daily chores, finish cooking for people in their family, and then come and sit with her and spend time with her through the day till the evening. And tell her all sorts of stories, not let her feel low for even a single moment, and also keep listening to her. The same story about her and grandfather time and again and again. How could someone spend so much of their personal time with someone else having spent my childhood in Delhi, I was quite alien to this kind of culture. The second thing I noticed was there is this friend of my uncle's and father, and he is both deaf and dumb. And I noticed how both my uncles and fathers, they were talking to him quite fluently in sign language. And I asked him, from where did you learn sign language from? And they did not have an answer. And after some time they told me that, we grew up together, we were playing together, and so we learned. Isn't it quite obvious? But this wasn't obvious to me. Someone could learn perfect sign language just by playing together wasn't obvious to me. And the instance taught me how fluently we all actually learn the things we really need to. The third thing that I noticed, I'm sure most of us would have noticed, is the abundance of knowledge some of the unschooled people in village had. The knowledge about the local environment, about the flora and fauna, about the health and well-being. And it pained me to see that despite the wealth of the knowledge, most of them had internalized some of the labels that we have given to them of being backward, poor and uneducated. Also the fact how a lot of people have internalized the fact that learning is something that happens only in schools and colleges. And just because they have not been to one, they are the ones who are left out. And this, through my journey, I saw was the case with many vibrant and rich communities, who despite the richness of life, saw themselves as uneducated, just because they had not learned rhyme and algebra in school. There is this another small tribe near Venezuela called Yanomamis. They live in large circular communal houses called Yanus. They do not have a chief. Decisions are taken by consensus, frequently after long debates. No hunter, even today, they say, eats the meat that he or she has killed. Children are not treated in any special way but as individuals. They share the responsibilities and learn from the society around. Now, a few years ago, I would have called these people backward for their alternative way of life, for their nakedness, for nothing else, for their lack of material possession. I would have said that they have tried and failed to keep up with the modern world. That they have little understanding of cars, hospitals, internet and banks. I would have also tried to set up a school for their children, to teach them what we know, our way of life, and to school them into our way of life. Today, however, I can understand when this Mexican person, Jose Carlos Merils, calls these other people the last free people on the earth. Free from the influence of government, free from the influence of subliminal power of advertising and media, and particularly free from the thoughts of others. Last year I met this lady who is working in Chhattisgarh with one such tribe. And she has been living and working with them for quite a few years, and she worked out a different way of working with children there. Something that comes from their own way of life. And then she approached the government officials. But the government official says, no ma'am, sorry, we cannot do this. You cannot teach them about self-reliance and self-governance. Then she says, but that's how children have been learning to live here. Elderly people have been talking about this all their time. Children grow up learning these things. It's in their stories, in their songs. But he said, no ma'am, we'll have to do away with this. This kind of thing will make them question the state, will make them question the government. How can we go into this? How can we go into all that? It will create a mess. Why don't we just simply teach our kids the alphabets and the rhymes that children throughout the country are learning? And it's working quite well. These instances made me see how present education system is knowingly or unknowingly destroying the diversity of life this planet has, killing the many ways of knowing and learning, and promoting one and the only one way. The other thing I learned, or I started seeing, was how current system is feeding us with this idea that we all need help of institutes to be taught how to learn and think. Palak, a young girl I met on my journey in Ladakh at an alternative learning space in Ladakh called Sekmol, showed me how this is not so true. She showed me how learning is so innate and so natural to us, how we learn so freely what we really wish to learn, and how we have unnecessarily complicated it. She told me how as a kid, she loved learning about different kinds of plants. She would go around the fields with her grandfather and they would discuss so many things around the plants. How in a few years she learned quite a lot about herbs and their various uses. But it all changed as she started attending a school nearby. Suddenly all that she knew about the plants around became useless. There were these whole other things that she had to learn but could not relate to. And in class 9th, her elder brother, who was working in Ladakh, told her about Sekmol, and she decided to run away from a village in Jammu and join it instead. In 1 year that Palak spent in Sekmol, where she was free to learn things she was really interested in, she learned how to take care of the solar electricity system, learned about the plants around, about the Ladakhi custom, their tradition, about the mountains around. She knew more about AC and DC current than I did. One evening while having dinner, I asked her, "What did you really enjoy learning the most?" And she said the best was learning how to milk the cows. Since I was a kid, I always dreamt of doing it perfectly, but no school would teach me that. I like how Aaron Colwell, in one of his articles, shares his thoughts on learning. He says, our ability to learn, like our ability to breathe, does not need to be improved or tampered with. It is utter nonsense, not to mention deeply insulting to say that people need to be taught how to learn or how to think. We are born knowing how to do these things. A person's freedom of learning is part of his freedom of thought, which I believe is even more basic than his freedom of speech. No human right, except for the right to life itself, is more fundamental than this. And if we take away from someone their right to decide what they will be curious about, or if we tell them you must think not about what interests and concerns you, but what interests and concerns us, we destroy their freedom of thought. I know many of us here would not agree with this. How can we let our children decide? We do not trust them, just like the colonists did not trust the Aboriginals in Australia and the natives in America. But I ask you to please think about it. Don't we feel we should at least let our children participate in choosing how and when they want to learn what? The other day I was going through this article. It asked, what will happen if a child realizes this? What we see arrives faster than what we hear, himself or herself. For someone to arrive at this conclusion autonomously is utterly profound. And it's also radically corrosive to power. It's utterly profound because this teaches them some very deep reflections on their place in the world. And it's corrosive to power because it teaches them that whether something is true or is not true does not depend on the book or an institute or a teacher. It solely depends on whether it's actually true. On whether something that we see actually arrives faster than what we hear. The article read how Socratic reflection is still being punished for the same reason that Socrates once was executed for. Because the communities that surround the education system are scared of consequences of letting people think freely. Because for the socio-economic system to survive, you need obedient people with more or less no urge to question. We do not need musicians and artists on street. We need workers in industry. Not people who have found out their own meaning, but who have learned the meaning we wish to teach. And probably that is why, not just here, but world over, schooling with a set curriculum decided by the experts and the powerful is being seen as a panacea, as a source of hope, as a means to promote this one single monoculture. Why else would a child in Ladakh, one in Bihar, one in Kerala and one in Rajasthan, and possibly in Africa and Europe be studying the same curriculum, which has less to do with their own culture, with their own little place, with their own language, with their own geography? Like the Yanomamis, I see that there are innumerable cultures, ways of living thriving in just nearby regions of where we live. I'm not saying at the least that these cultures are perfect. No, they are not. All I'm saying is that all of these exist, and all are special in their own way. However, as we talk here, we can see a lot of them being schooled and homogenized in the name of development and modernization. As I say all this, please do not understand that I am against any form of teaching. I love teaching and I have enjoyed learning from some fabulous people. All I doubt is the space for it when the person being taught is not even asked or consulted. The space for, I am doing this for your own good type of teaching. This kind of teaching might be necessary sometimes, but to think that the whole education system should revolve around it does not seem right. One of my favorite quotes on education is by Leo Tolstoy, one which I am still trying to understand. And he says, education is the tendency of one person to make another just like himself or herself. Education is compulsory, forcible action of one person upon another. Tagore writes of what he thinks education should be. He says, I believe the object of education is freedom of mind, which can only be achieved through path of freedom. Drawing from these two thoughts, I feel education would take a very different shape, if at all it takes some shape, from what it is today. If you ask me, however, I would share my dream with you. I dream of a way of life where there is no compulsory schooling, and different ways of knowing and learning are encouraged, wherein there are spaces where people can come together and share and learn from one another, wherein artists, farmers, scientists, activists, musicians, and people well versed in any other discipline are willing to teach someone who wants to learn at a nominal cost, wherein the knowledge that would otherwise be freely available is not boxed in some grandiose buildings and sold to people at exorbitant prices. A way of life where, irrespective of age, everyone is a teacher and everyone is a learner. At the end, especially for those who think improved technology, more computers and screens, better child-friendly techniques, and not freedom of mind is the answer to some of these problems, let me end this by sharing with you a small story that was adapted by Manish Jain from Shikshantar and then partly modified by me. The original story was written by Rabindranath Tagore, in which he had warned us of dangers of schooling almost 80 years ago. In the parrot's training, we are told of a golden cage that is built to imprison the wild and uncivilized parrot so that she can be properly educated. In addition to this usual school curriculum, she was also expected to listen and obey. She was allowed to question, but within the system and not question the system itself. First, the teachers tried stuffing her with pages of official textbooks. Days went by, but that did not work. Then UNICEF project came along with all kinds of child-friendly and joyful techniques. The cage was decorated with all sorts of colorful pictures and charts, but still no improvement. Then World Bank gave loan to the king to build a bigger cage with a nice toilet. A software company gave her a laptop with free Wi-Fi connection. Still no difference. Harvard researchers were invited to conduct studies on parrot's brain and multiple intelligences, and that still did not work. As her distress increased, she was given mindfulness training. They also taught her about child rights. An hour of silence and meditation was included in the timetable. The only thing parrot was not allowed to do was to leave the cage. Whenever she tried to break out, she was put in back. In fact, she was scolded for being ungrateful and being impertinent. Time and again she was reprimanded. We are doing so much for you, spending so much on you, and you do not even care. Over the years, parrot did end up learning a few things, but lost the interest in learning itself. She slowly became dependent on the very cage that she wanted to break out from. She internalized the fact that people around her were indeed doing to her a favor, and that she and eventually her children too need support of this wonderful cage. One day the cage was accidentally left open, but she was afraid to venture out. Her dreams were reduced to being a rat in the rat race. Slowly her spirit withered away. In the end, a lot of people made a lot of money on parrot's education. Everyone benefited except the parrot, who became just another brick in the wall. Thank you.